Welcome back to episode 29 of Pursuing the Perfect Pint, where Brent and I are both in very warm locations. Myself sitting here in, I can never get the pronunciation right, Reims, and you're in Italy, so really enjoying the hot weather. So the weatherman this week, I think I can do it for you and tell you it's very warm.
Yeah, I guess it'd be a nice change of pace, Danielle. You can be reporting live from just outside Paris and give us
Yes.
a weather update, and we'll cover that in the little market update. But yeah, I think we're started into harvest, so yeah, we'll come back to that. But yeah, episode 29. This is a real interesting one because we still with a UK flavor, but a real interesting story that we're going to link. This is one of the best examples of linking barley all the way through the brewery and a great heritage, both from a barley perspective, but also from a family perspective.
Yeah, I love that. Heritage beer, barley, timeless beer. I think it has a very interesting story. But before we move on to that, Brent, other than it being very warm, what do you have to tell us,
Yeah,
weatherman?
so you're just outside Paris, and I was hearing similar. It's very warm. I guess I would say though, the French crop harvest is starting for winter barley. Early results are quite favorable. So I think this more recent heat hasn't really had any detrimental impact. So I think we're in pretty good shape. Well, now's really where things get serious because now we're going to see what the actual results are, both on quality and yield. But the very, very early results would point to a pretty good start, which is always good. Get a good start.
Yeah.
Having a good winter crop in storage for barley would be an important first step, and then probably more importantly, we'll have to wait for the spring barley just to see what the heat has done in the last 4 to 6 weeks. But
Yeah.
I say mostly positive. On a wider scale, we're here. I guess around the time that this peace deal is, I guess, now signed, but as we keep saying, Danielle, there's just a little apprehension around it. I think we need this thing to carry on. It sounds like vessels are moving again through the Strait of Hormuz, which I read some number which I think was probably pretty close, but up to 600 vessels were waiting either to get out of the Persian Gulf or to get in, which would be primarily energy, oil, and LNG vessels. So we have already seen some big impacts. Commodity markets
Yeah.
that had built in a big risk premium due to that conflict. We've seen oil prices are down circa 20%.
Yeah.
That'll do a lot when we get back to reducing inflation impacts and the beer affordability issue that I keep droning on about. But I guess if this thing is sustained and holds, we should actually see some wider economic benefit that will actually have a chance for somewhat normal growth to come through. So there's some positives on the macro side as well.
Yeah. But as you said, still a question mark as to where it's all going to ultimately land.
Yeah, yeah. We need some calmness, as I have said several
Yeah.
times. We've been through such a disruptive period the last 6 years. It would be really much needed. Just to some extended period of calmness would be well received.
For now, 60 days on the horizon, so
Yeah,
let's
let's
enjoy
see.
it. And Brent, so when you were in the UK, I think you had the most interesting conversation with James Clark from Hook Norton Brewery, and I think just James should tell the story himself because it's such a lovely
Yeah,
story.
yeah. So the trip to the UK, of course, was to see Barley, and that we checked that, and we have a little more of that story coming. But for the chance to stop in and connect with James, and also hear their story, which is amazing. But as you say, let's hear it directly from what I thought was a really great conversation with
Yeah.
James Clark at Hook Norton. Okay. Uh, the pursuit of the perfect pint has now taken us to Hook Norton, and we're at the Hook Norton Brewery with James Clark, and he's going to tell you the story, which is amazing. But first of all, James, thanks for taking some time to sharing the
Pleasure.
story. You take up, I'll tease it up. 1849. Tell us what happened.
So 1849, my great-great-grandfather moved to the village. It's a small farm of 52 acres with a malting. So at the time when every community in the UK would have been making beer, not least because the water was often unsafe to drink. So by making beer without water, you rendered it safe. So he was growing this barley and malting it. Using water from his own wells here, and I think natural that he would try brewing himself, which he did. Obviously, some success with on a very small scale to start with. He expanded his malting business, was obviously quite successful because it expanded with another set of floors in 1865, a bit more of a brewery in the 1870s. And then one of the defining points was in the 1880s, the railway came through at Norton, which obviously opened up communication and distribution hugely for us.
You could then that opened the door to ship cask beer into the city, for example.
Absolutely, yeah. So before that, we were sending beer by horse as far as the horse could go.
Yeah.
Once the railway came, and the railway was driven by William Bliss of Chipping Norton, the nearest market town, who produced textiles. Obviously, we're in the Cotswolds, and wool was very big, but he needed to get his products to market, and that meant London. So he was instrumental in the railway linking Chipping Norton with the main line in Banbury. And the railway passes a mile away from where we're sat now. So once that was open, we could then send beer to the railway and distribute to places like Stratford-on-Avon and Cheltenham, which have been way beyond where we could go before.
So we're more or less straight west of London, the city?
Yes. West and slightly north.
Yeah. So if you're in London, it's worth the drive out here, first of all. Amazing to walk on the site and see something from 1849 still operational. So great grandfather. Yeah, very good. In terms of brands, I guess could you tell us a bit about your main brand?
Yeah, we're still very much of the traditional English style of ale. So our two main beers are 3.4%, what we'd call a session bitter, whether that's PC in this country anymore or not, I'm not sure. And then we have a premium version of that Old Hooky at 4.6%. And those two beers still make up about 80% of our sales. And we got some golden beers and one or two other beers and one or two old recipes that we've resurrected. But every beer that we brew here is brewed using Maris Otter, a variety of malting barley, which we've been using, I think, from when Maris Otter first came on the market or shortly afterwards, and we've stuck with it for over 60 years.
We talked about 1965 as we were leading, was maybe when Maris Otter first came on, and it's your base malt, basically. It's your main
It's
malt
our base
for
malt for everything. So a beer like Old Hooky will have 7 or 8% crystal malt, but the rest is Maris Otter Pale. The beer that I've got in front of me here is Hooky Gold, and that's 100% Maris Otter Pale Ale malt.
Yep. Right. And in terms of the split between what you cask or keg versus packaged, what's that look like, generally speaking?
We're about 75% draft beer, the remainder packaged beer. Of the packaged beer, it's virtually all bottle, not can. And of the draft beer, probably single figure percent is keg. We're still developing a keg offer because we're still very much known for cask, but as the market in this country is changing, we need to make sure we adapt with it. But, we tend to take, mid to longer term views rather than follow any fad too quickly.
Yeah. Just anecdotally, you're probably glad you're not packaging in aluminum these days, because it's probably one of the biggest headaches from a brewer's perspective. The cost of aluminum is skyrocketed. So
I think so. And
you should feel good about where you're at.
Absolutely. And then, the whole packaging side and the sustainability and the glass waste, and it seems very complex. And I know we're not in the European Union now, but there doesn't seem to be any consistency across Europe, and it's a big challenge and a big cost for businesses as well.
Yeah, yeah. So you've got that portfolio of brands, and I guess you have a lot of visitors come in. You mentioned in prepping for this, the visitor center and the tours is a really growing part of the business.
Hugely, yeah. We've been doing brewery tours since, I think, the 60s, when father and grandfather would show people around, and then probably have a polypin of not ideal temperature beer in the boardroom. And we've moved on since then. We opened our first visitor centre 27 years ago. And I think because we're in a touristy area, but it was definitely the right decision to make. seeing the whole visitor offer as a really, really important, part of the business. Obviously commercially, but also with a growing interest in provenance of food and drink. And is it real provenance? People can come here, do a brewery tour, see directly firsthand what's involved, probably talk to some of the brewing team as well on their way around, sample the beers at source. And, that's absolutely key for us. And every penny that we've invested in the visitor experience has been absolutely the right thing to do.
Yeah. From a heritage standpoint, you've kind of got it all nailed. You've got the long history, family history of the 1849, using a Maris Otter, say a famous malting barley variety, and certainly famous for this part of the world. So you've got all that, and I guess that has a natural attraction to people. And you're actually now starting to see where I call it the foot traffic is starting to get back to where it was, say, pre-pandemic. Is that?
Yes, yeah. We always had a lull immediately pre-pandemic. It was probably relatively strong as people stayed in this country. Then it certainly dropped, but it's coming back now. And I think probably coming back a bit more at the moment with the fuel price, and people are a bit nervous about maybe traveling abroad. But yes, and I looked at our visitor book only yesterday, and there was a lovely comment from a child who had been here and said, what a lovely time, things for kids to do as well. And I thought that's great, because obviously not promoting the beer to minors, but they come here, seen the horses, seen the goats in the field, had a walk around. There's a word search in the museum for children, because our museum contains some of the local industrial heritage as well. So really, really important. But yeah, absolutely right.
And you mentioned horses, so maybe tell a little bit of the story of how you still use horses.
Yeah, so 3 Shire horses. We got back into, I think, in 1984. A local farmer wanted to buy horses, but wanted a use. So he bought the horses and we bought the dray. Then we took the horses on. We currently have 3 horses, Brigadier, Balmoral and Cromwell. They're Shire horses, and they deliver beer locally on a Thursday. I endeavour to try and ride one once a week under the absolute watchful guise of Nick, the head coachman, and they do a few local shows and charity events. So they actually have a very busy summer of events coming up, and it's really important to preserve the Shire horse breed, because there are less breeding Shire horse mares than breeding panda bears.
Well, and do you know anyone else that's still using that horse feature at a brewery level?
There's I think there's a handful of breweries in England, including Thwaites and Sam Smith's, but less than there were. And we need to make sure these breeds are used. So hence, the Shire is not historically a horse to ride, but if a ridden Shire helps keep that gene pool and preserve that breed, then, and in fact for us, riding a Shire, particularly in the winter, is a really good form of exercise.
Yeah. I had to think it's got to be at least a very rare occasion to have the horse connection still viable, still alive.
It is, and it is obviously it's a cost to the business, but the benefit it brings in terms of the visitor experience, but also taking the Hook Norton message out to a wider audience. So I love it when we take the horses to our pub that's got a bit of a fun day on, and you see children having their photo taken, and they're very much gentle giants. But it also just gets that message over.
Yep.
It's, of course, Hook Norton Brewery is about the beer, but it's about so much more than just the beer.
It's the story. Yeah. The other thing that everyone's talking about these days is sustainability, and you were describing it earlier, and I think it's amazing to think of all the transformation you're doing with a brewery back to 1849. So maybe talk about your decarbonization journey, which is still ongoing, but you're making some really big strides in that.
Yeah. So we, as a family business, and historically most breweries were family businesses, they were, very careful with the cash for the money. So careful on things like energy. But back then, 30, 40, 50 years ago, energy was so much cheaper than it is now. But obviously it isn't just the cost, it is the carbon bit we're all very well aware of. So we're in a historic building. Most of the current brewery building, the main tower brewery, was built in 1899. But our aim is to be in the top quartile of our sector in terms of carbon emissions. We've signed up with Planet Mark. We've installed PV that's generating, at the moment, just under half our electric, but I think it will probably, when we bring it all on stream, be a lot more. We put a new boiler in. We had to go oil-fired because there's no gas in the village, but we're complementing that where we can with electric. And we've seen a fairly significant reduction in the amount of electric we're buying in through our supplier. We're generating a lot ourselves, and we're confident with some more investment and maybe some changes, slightly tweaks in process, we can see that further. But at the moment, we appear to be making savings in excess of those which I thought we would.
Yeah. And your goal, you said, being in the top 25 percentile, your aspirations or your likelihood is you'll be even higher in the.
Oh yeah, I mean, we won't be as high probably as a purpose-built modern brewery, but I want to absolutely be in the top 20, top 10 even. And a team here a small team, but they're pretty engaged with where we need to be. I mean, we all seen the impact of energy cost, but also energy security, particularly at the moment. So, and I think it's really, they were focused anyway, but events of the last 2 or 3 months have really focused what we need to do and the reasons why we need to do it.
Yeah. And when you tie that all together, so you got a family story, you got a Maris Otter story, now you got the decarbonization. When you tie that all together, you'd have to think that's something that can connect with consumers. And you got a lot of people coming to Hook Norton, and if you can pull them in, I think the story almost tells itself. But I guess there's some work to do on marketing and so on. But you have to be quite excited about what that looks like when you tie it all together.
Oh, really excited. I'm in a very lucky position to be working here and leading on a number of the projects. And it's interesting. There's a definite link with, we have a team of traveling salespeople who go and visit independent pubs and sell them beer. It's becoming increasingly hard to actually get to see people because everyone is so busy and trying to. So one way now is actually, if you can be present in that pub and talk to a few of the consumers and sell them or talk to them about some of the things that we're doing and the positives, then they can almost say to the licensee, well, look, this is a really good story from Hook Norton. We should have some of their beer.
Yeah.
So it's really turning that on its head. And I've noticed that particularly the last few months or certainly this year. And we have to do things differently. So we will hang on to all of the history and the, the records and everything that's rich there. But I don't think my father, grandfather, great grandfather would want me to just sit here and be restricted by what they did. And my job is to try and improve things and hand the business on, hopefully in a better state than which I took it on. That's no deference to where I took it. But we have to have new ideas. We have to try them. And, generally high risk with your time, bit low risk with your money. Yes, we're very lucky. And I think it's a great story, but it's a true story.
Yeah. And you can make some of these decisions in your own time and place because you've got the family history, so you can do it at your own pace when it's the right time and so on.
Very supportive board, only 10 ordinary shareholders, 2 families involved with the business, and all very much there for the long term and making, conservative investment where we need to. Been here 177 years this year, and the plan is to do that again and some more, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, you've got all those things coming together nicely. The day that the pubs start calling you to bring the beer out will be, then you've made it. That would be a good time to get there. In terms of what's coming in the future, you mentioned you've got a non coming out very soon. This is late May, and you've got something coming on the very
so it should be end of June. We're doing a 0 version of Old Hooky. There's definitely a market for the 0, and the general best way is seeing us take the existing brand and do a 0 version of it. So all the flavor profiling has been agreed, and I think it's in motion. And it was quite interesting being involved with that de-alkalized Old Hooky, and that will come to market. We'll have end of June in the shop, and then hopefully commercially early July.
Yep. One more offering to consumers, and that we talked about it, the non-elk and low. Say low, you've done some historically. You've done some 2.8 and some 3.2. Was it?
Yeah, historically, certainly if you went back 50 years, our biggest selling beer was our mild at 2.8%, and then next was our Hooky at 3.3. And these were beers that were low in strength because they serviced a market with generally quite hard manual workers and needed liquid refreshment, but not. So mild, if you look at mild, where mild was in this country post-World War II was huge because we had a lot of heavy industry, people working 10, 12 hours underground or by the furnace or wherever. And so we've had a history of lower strength beers. And then, alcohol by volumes have crept up, and then there's been a perception that a bit stronger is more premium, which it's not, because it's harder to brew a 3.5% cask ale than a 4.5, I think. And now we're seeing a comeback to lower strength beers, and I think that's probably a good thing and provides an opportunity.
And over 50 years, we're kind of, the cycle is almost full circle now.
Yeah.
People are, I think, going back to that more moderate alcohol and so on. So, well, James, I guess maybe we'll finish off with this, because we call it the Pursuing the Perfect Pint podcast. So a couple things. One, you can never attain the perfect pint. So you have to keep looking. But if you wanted to describe for anyone listening, in your mind, what would the perfect pint look like? Maybe it could be the brand or the occasion or the one, the people you're sharing with. But what is the perfect pint in your mind?
Well, you've taken the words out of my mouth, because the perfect pint covers all of those. And I say to people, what's your favorite beer? You should always be able to say the one in my hand right now.
Yeah.
But I say to people, I don't go to the pub for beer, and they look at me and as though sometimes, as though I'm not talking any sense, where I say I go for the beer and the company and the environment and the service and hospitality as well. And they are all absolute components, because we're selling beer, but we're selling experience, we're selling fun. And sometimes I might go, and the company I want is my own company, but beer is that great social drink. And to enjoy a beer with friends in a nice environment, whether that's a log fire or glorious sunshine or anything in between, is something quite special that we should savor.
Yeah, for sure. So I would say, if you get the chance, get to Hook Norton, take the tour. You won't see anything else like it, and hear some of the story directly from James and the tour guide. So I guess, James, thanks for your time. Thanks for the tour. Amazing. And thanks for
cheers.
The Pursuit of the Perfect Pint. Cheers.
Yeah.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, Brent, with heritage barley, timeless beer, generations in the making. I mean, what was it, 1849? And using Maris Otter and making even some of the, original beers. I think it's a fantastic story.
Yeah. Still using horses, like I have to say, Danielle, that was probably one of the easiest little discussions to have, because the story does kind of tell itself, and I felt I was just a bit of a passenger along that. It's just a wonderful story, and all the things they're doing. So all the things we talk about, and telling the story of the importance of barley in the malt, of course, in the beer, and the heritage of variety of Maris Otter, and the family story. That you couldn't get a better example of how you link everything together in the malt supply chain. And I guess more importantly, it seems like consumers are kind of gravitating to that. So it definitely affirms what we've always thought, that there's a wonderful story there. We just need to do a better job of telling it.
Absolutely. And I think you hear a lot of maltsters and brewers, the sort of halo effect that Maris Otter has. I can remember one maltster, oh, you just spit at it and it makes delicious malt, So I think to be able to pull that through for such a long period of time, and clearly, I mean, being able to sell that story into loads of pubs and tell a good story.
Yeah, and some of the maltsters that are keeping that alive, that doesn't go without a lot of work as well. So I guess where there's a demand for it is good, and we see that it continues on. So there's definitely it's a great example, and I guess we'd like to profile more of those. So I guess if anyone has a similar story, I think those are the kind of stories we would definitely like to profile more and more.
And I loved what he said, to end on that note. What is the perfect pint? It's the drink in your hand and the company you're having and in the surroundings you're enjoying it. So I really enjoy that.
Yeah. I like the first comment was, the perfect pint's the one that's in your hand right now, but there's more to it. And I think he said it a couple of times very well. I think it is a social, beer is a social product, and the experience, we hear the word experience and social and all those things. That's where beer has a long tradition. And I think we can see that it'll hold. We just need to keep shifting to where consumers want to be. The more moderate alcohol, non-alcohol, those are things that can extend that beer tradition.
Yeah. And where are we off to next, Brent, next week?
I think we've got just to finish off the say the UK loop. We've got another farmer story, and then we're going to branch out and see some different parts of the world. So yeah, we got one more outcome from our UK trip, and then we'll start going elsewhere around the globe.
See you next week. Cheers.
Yep. Cheers.